For the record, it is August 5th, 2021. This is our first BDA training for the month of August, and time keeps on slipping into
the future.
Thank
There you go.
For our training today, we are going to talk about something that actually, Jason, you brought up, and I thought it'd be appropriate for us to have a kind of a group discussion about. But regulations that affect our industry, and how does that conversation affect the way that we talk to other agents. So that'll be our conversation today. You guys can bring all of your insight and things that you have seen as well. And you might, honestly, I'm partially interested in hearing from everyone here as well, because I'm very much in the insurance regulation portion, whereas you guys all have your serious license. Maybe it'll bring something different to the table for that conversation, but that's what the focus of today is. So we're probably not going to take up the whole hour and a half, but I think with everything that's going on and us coming to the end of the year with different rules and things like that, and regulations that are coming down the pipeline and have already come, I think it'd be good for us to have a discussion about it and what that looks like. So that's what the focus today is. Next week, we are going to have the second carrier that 3Mark brought into the insurance carrier family. We're going to have National Western Life on so their annuities as well. Not the life side, the annuity side. So that will be a good discussion, and I'm betting, because it's going to be a carrier and not just my beautiful face, that everyone else will be on as well, of course. With that said, though, I'll kind of start off the conversation and give a little bit of a format to it. And there's a couple articles that I had pulled up and saw that I think were really good at expressing some of the things that are happening. One specifically. And then, like I said, we're going to open up. There's some things that aren't on here that I think are important to mention as well. But, well, let me actually take a step back. I like running the meeting and, pushing the narrative, but let me ask you guys, out of the rules that you have seen, the regulations that you've seen come out over the past, decade or so that still affect our industry, what are the ones that you have seen that are the most important and that have caused the biggest change?
That's a good question. One that immediately comes to mind is A49.
Yeah.
Over the last 10 years?
Yeah, I did the last 10 years because usually those still affect, what we're doing, or they change something. But AG49. So really quick, what is AG49?
It affects how IUL illustrations are to be designed.
Yep. That's the simple of it. We'll leave it there for now. All right. So Jeff has AG49. Jody, Jason, what other regulations have you seen that have really affected the industry?
Nathan, are you just looking for the insurance side or the security side, or see all the above?
Doesn't matter if it affects how we sell or anything of that nature, then it's something that we should talk about.
I don't know the numbers. Oh, go ahead, Jody. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say one of the biggest changes I saw last year was just the changes in the age of the RMDs.
RMDs. So, can anyone name what act changed that?
I'm not good with act numbers.
No problem.
Jeff's raising his hand, which never happens. So you got it.
Sorry, actually, I switched the screen, so I didn't see him raise his hand. Jeff, you raised your hand. Which act is it?
I believe it was part of the Secure Act.
That is correct. The Secure Act. Yep. The Secure Act is an acronym. I'll pull it up because I don't know it off the top of my head, but that is something we will discuss that as well. Jason, do you have another one?
Just changes in, I guess you can actually, defining suitability and fiduciary responsibilities.
So I'm gonna go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, just on the security side, it's been, they've really been pounding it and focusing more on, on suitability has been, it gets harder and harder and harder as time has gone by.
I'd agree. I'm also going to throw in that category of suitability and fiduciary regulations as the DOL ruling.
Yeah.
The DOL ruling that never was, but it's still in the works. Any other regulations? I'll bring up one that happened this year. 7702.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big one for the insurance world. Any other ones that you guys can think of?
No, because I get flagged by compliance pretty much weekly, so I'm not a good resource for this at all.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. Well, no, that means that you should be the greatest because they're telling you you're doing it all wrong, Jason.
Yeah, they just tell me what's wrong. I just got flagged for 59 red flags for social media this week.
59 red flags.
Wow.
So I got rid of my Facebook account, my business Facebook account completely, just because, I'm not dealing with it anymore.
Yeah.
I
And
understand.
some of it, I don't see the rationale behind it. It was really, to me, some of it was really
It's ridiculous.
silly.
I liked a photo from Father's Day, and that was one of the red flags. I'm not allowed to comment on posts, anything of the such. And it was funny because yesterday Dennis gave for the idea of the week, the things that he was telling everybody was a lot of the things that I got flagged for. So I don't think anybody really truly understands or knows it. And this is also only for securities individuals, not for insurance producers. So it was kind of 59.
Wow.
So,
I've been
Yeah.
liking stuff on LinkedIn, not thinking anything of it. Hopefully they don't come back.
yeah, they've been it's cool. Tina Booz, I think is her name. She has me on her radar like 24/7. So it's okay. This isn't my first getting warnings and sitting down, and I'm just non-compliant. Nathan knows that. So
Absolutely. Just drop the securities license. Come over to the dark side, the insurance world.
I don't know if it was in the last 10 years, and I think the NAIC was involved in it as far as the length of surrender charges on annuities.
Gotcha.
Of annuities going out to 16, 17 years, and then they, I think, said the max you could have is 10.
I mean, American Equity still has a 15-year. Athene still has a 15-year.
Do they really?
Yeah.
do they put a cap on the surrender fee? Is there a limit on that too, like a ceiling and that they can't charge over?
I'm sure there is, but I don't know any rule or regulation that came out that changed that specifically on that side. But all right, well, let's jump into some of these because those are a really good a good start. And again, this is good for us to know about because some of these are really large pieces of regulation that, for example, the DOL ruling, if that had gone through, and I know there's some things that are still in the works and states are changing that. Anyways, I'm getting down the rabbit hole already. That changes the way that insurance agents and financial services representatives sell. And so that's why I want to just take a step back of It is important that we keep up to date and are either part of groups or getting insurance newsletters or things like that, letting us know what's going on with the industry. Because if we're from a BDA perspective, we're part of the people that are supposed to be sharing that information with the agents and advisors that we're working with. Because a lot of them, I mean, does looking up insurance regulations from an agent perspective, does that make them any money?
No.
No, absolutely not. And most of them, although they like to stay on top of that, if they actually analyze their business and said, what are the activities that are important to actually making my practice grow, that would probably be at one of the bottom rungs of what they're doing. However, at the same token, those regulations also then can affect how they go about and do business. And if they're not aware of them at all, then they can be blindsided by rules and regulations that could either work in their favor. They could use to get ahead of the tide per se that's coming in. Tide, not the tide, the waves coming in. You see the wave coming and you prepare for it. Not the tide. Thank you for smiling, smiling.
Well, yeah.
But the idea being is that they go ahead.
Could have just said tsunami and everybody would understand.
Yeah, thank you. Yep, I got it. I'll do that next time. But that's something that's important, and that's really what a good BDA will keep their ear to the ground. It's not like they're spending all their time looking at this stuff, but in some way, shape, or form, they're hooked into information that then can be dispersed and to let other people know about, so that they can say, hey, this is what's happening. This is how this is going to affect what you're doing. And this is what I'm making as a recommendation. So I'll give one example of that. Then we'll actually talk about some of the regulations and things like that. This could be a long discussion, so we're going to try and keep it, concise on a few things. But the biggest one and the most recent example is the 7702 rulings. So literally, especially at the beginning of the year, and this has happened throughout the year, I have had multiple conversations with agents and agencies about 7702 and how that affects whole life and how that affects index universal life. And people then have looked at me for answers to, hey, what is going to happen with this and how can I leverage this to my advantage? So literally, I'll use the one that Jeff and I talked about, is that, we probably won favor and got someone to kind of move in our direction because we understood the 7702 ruling. So that's how directly effective it is from our perspective of, we knew about something and we were able to give an intelligent response and answer. And that moved that person to be like, oh, well, no one else is giving this information, or what you're talking about. Let's potentially move this business over here. So that's how direct, that's the direct response to that. So this is not something that is, oh, it's regulations, this is boring, this is stupid stuff. I want to drill in your brain that if you understand it to a certain level, and I'm not saying you have to be a master at it, but at least to a certain level, then you can have real conversations with other agents and advisors and ask them, hey, did you know about this ruling? And most of them can be like, oh, well, yeah, I heard something about it, but I have no idea how it affects, what I'm doing. Or some of them will say, well, no, I didn't even know that happened. And therefore, by doing that, you instantly become an expert in their brain of, you're a go-to person for that information. So you can leverage that to your advantage. Go ahead,
Nathan, so if you were calling someone and you're like, hey, how are how's your IMO? How's that relationship going? And you said, has your IMO explained to you the 7702 law changes or whatever? And if they say no, is that, that opens the door to, maybe we should sit down and have a conversation, because you're not getting everything that you should be getting from your IMO. I mean, should we be that forward about this?
You definitely can be. So let's use 7702 as an example of like a real conversation that you can have and how you're bringing it up within the conversation. So you call out to an agent and you're asking them a little bit about their business. So before you get to 7702, learning and asking, well, hey, do you teach your clients how to get out of debt using whole life? Do you do tax-free retirement using IULs? And if they say yes to either one, you can formulate the questions in a billion different ways. That's really great. Out of curiosity, do you know about the 7702 ruling that happened, January 1st of this year? So there's how you pair it together with, because if you just go into 7702 and they're a final expense agent, they do not give a flying flip about 7702 and what that's going to affect. Maybe they see you as an expert, but it's not going to help your cause. It's not going to help their cause. It's a waste of time conversation.
Okay.
But if they're in that market space and they're selling the type of products that the regulation affects, then that's where you bring up the regulation and say, how to curiosity, did you know that this happened? And then you can use it in multiple, whether they say yes, no, whatever, doesn't matter. But in the context of how you use it, a kind of against their other IMO, is great. I mean, especially if they don't understand it or don't know it and they're looking for you for answers. All you do is you take a step back, and even if they say yes, that's great. Well, just so you understand, one of the things that we do and part of our value proposition is that we keep our ear to the ground for regulations that affects the agents and advisors that we work with. And because of our relationship with people in the industry, we get that information sometimes before other people do. Sometimes everyone sees it depending on what you're tied into. But we think it's very important for us to be able to take a little bit of that off your plate and have us handle that. So at least you get information, we can have discussions. Is that the type of relationship that you would want with a business development advisor, with a marketer? And if they say yes, so said, well, great. I mean, out of curiosity, the marketer that you're working with right now, do they do that for you? Does the marketing organization help you out understand those different aspects? And if you say no, then said, well, hey, I'm not here to, I don't want to take all your business, but is there a possibility for us to earn some of that business on this side? I think we can do an amazing job and that's kind of the format of the conversation.
Okay.
Now I'm using that as that was extremely salesy, and going out all the bullet points. But like I said, you get to know someone, Jason, and and you have that conversation. Literally, you can go directly, as you said, well, your IMO is not doing that for you. You need to move all your stuff over here. Like, we can do everything that you're doing plus better. Like, let's have that conversation.
Yeah.
So it's up to you about how direct you want to be with it. But that's kind of the language within it of regulation. Find out what they're doing, have a regulation in the back of your brain about how that affects and how that affects their business. And then when that comes up and you realize those two coincide, bring up the regulation, see what they know about it.
Yep.
And just hope that they don't know more than you.
Nathan, yeah. Real quick, and I know that everybody's different, but have you noticed that a more direct approach works, or kind of massaging it, getting, working that relationship is more tactful? I mean, is it better to just kind of be the expert, the knowledgeable, book smart guy, or do you want to be more of, and I'm going to use this, street smart kind of approach?
I mean, it depends on where you're at. If it's an initial conversation, then I'm usually slow stepping it. Whereas if I've had a couple conversations, or this is someone that I know, and they know that I'm in the industry, we've had conversations before, they know I want their business, then I would be very direct about it. Like, hey, this happened. Your IMO did not tell you about this. This is something that we believe is very important. Is there a way that we can earn your business? Because we'd be giving you this information all the time, and help you understand what that means.
Gotcha.
So again, everything comes back to the core of it, of understanding relationships. And where you're at in that relationship is how forward you can be, or how understanding that person. And I know that makes it non-scriptable in essence. But that really is what the BDA role is, which is why, for everyone that's on it is not, sorry, I'm getting my soapbox for it, but that's why it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
But
Cool.
it is an extremely important role.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions just about that before we jump into a few of the other ones? Great. Well, then since we were on it real quick, 7702, all you have to do is Google it. Just type in 7702 regulation. You can literally type in just 7702 tax code. Actually, literally, if you type in 7702, the first thing that pops up is the Investopedia definition. So very easily to be searchable. I would maybe find 1 or 2 articles that are in your back that you can put in your back pocket. Because I said, you don't have to be the expert. You can send that out to other people. And long story short for 7702 is what it did is it affected how much reserves whole life companies needed to have. It affected the MEC guidelines, so the maximum amount that clients can put into policies, which affects a lot of other arenas basically. So the long story short is, in whole life, from what I've been seeing, is because the amount of reserves that they have and how they're processing the guaranteed rate used to be 4% basically. Now that's a little bit more in flux, where it can go down to almost as 2%. So it's going to be interesting as the end of the year comes and everyone's required, all carriers are required to reflect that within their policies. What's going to happen to the guaranteed side of whole life? Because whole life, that's one of its major functions and benefits, is that it gives you a guarantee. And then there's a dividend rate, which of course not guaranteed, but it sounds like there's going to be more play within what carriers are going to do with their guaranteed rate and reflecting what's going to happen, where the dividend rate could be reflected as a little bit higher, almost showing what's going to kind of leaning more towards like an IUL almost. So understand that the idea that it's going to affect whole life policies, and to see what's going on, talk with a carrier or two. One America would be a good place to start about what they're doing for their policies and how that's affecting them. On the IUL side, it has a more direct beneficial relationship with the 7702 guideline, because what it really did is it raised the MEC limits. Now there's some things that have happened within that of repricing and carriers doing that, but long story short is it allows a client that is maximally funding a policy to typically put in more money related to the death benefit than what they would be able to do a year ago. So this really only affects people that are maximally funding a policy. If they're minimally funding it, or they're just using it for death benefit, then not as directly relational to what the 7702 guideline affected. But if someone's putting in, $10,000 a month and $5,000 a year, whatever it is, if they're maximally funding it, it allows them to have a higher death benefit, or rather a death benefit then that can anywhere between 10 to sometimes 100% more money can go into the policy than it was able to do last year. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, basically your illustrations are going to, of course, again, give you that information so that it will tell you the 7-pay test and the percentage, the margin between the cash value and the face amount.
Yeah.
Basically what it's done is it's just recalculated those, if you will. So, Nathan, you mentioned that you had a couple of articles. Are any of them related to the 7702?
Yeah, so like one.
Would you be able to share those with us?
Absolutely. In fact, I posted one in the band a long time ago. I'll repost it though, because it's kind of far back at this point. But does anyone know who Bobby Samuelson is?
I've heard the name.
No.
I would look him up. He is probably considered to be one of the top analysts of life insurance and annuities. He has a website called the Life Product Review. You can get some free stuff on that website, but if you want to subscribe, it's like $179 a month to get access to the information that he shares. But he takes a really, really big deep dive into products and will tear them apart, like the cost of insurances and indexing rates. He really gets into it, and he really probably more on the IUL side, but he does do an analysis for whole life as well. And then because of indexing, he's semi big into the annuity world as well. But the article that I posted was from Bobby Samuelson, and there was another one that I posted as well that, like I said, I'll repost it, but those two were pretty good about how they were going to affect. Now, Bobby's gets really wordy, like, because he's he gets into it. But you can always unband, you can always search, so there's a search function. So if I put in, and I'll show you guys real quick. So I typed in to the search bar 7702. And so here's the post right there. And so there's Bobby Samuels says the impacts of section 7702. That's his podcast. Then Life Product Review. That's the actual article. And then there's another article that we posted as well that talked about how it was affecting as well. And this was from April, so there might be some new stuff out there as well. But those were three good. You guys can just look up 7702 and band, and that will pop up. But so that's a good one. Like 7702 is, it's kind of the reason I bring up that one first too is because it's something that's still kind of up in air. Because not all carriers have switched their stuff yet and changed their guidelines and their how they're doing their illustrations. And a lot of them are repricing things because of that rule as well. So they're required to have it completed by the end of the year. But that means that there are still carriers right now that if you sell their product right now, that it's good to know, especially if you're dealing with someone that's, you know, putting in a lot of money into a policy and funding it the right way, then if they sell that same carrier now, or they wait until the ruling changes, that could make a huge difference in what the illustration is going to be. So that is something that does directly affect those agents that are selling dividend paying whole life, Nelson Nash, infinite banking stuff, or on the other side of the IULs, the Patrick Kelly's, the Douglas Andrews, and tax-free retirement stuff using IULs, and they're maximally funding the policies. Excuse me. So be aware of that.
Yeah, and all this has to go through the states for filing, doesn't it?
What was that?
They all have to file with the states.
Yeah, also true. And like I said, all that's supposed to be done before end of the year, basically, is that they have to have filed that and they have to have it changed before, I believe the effective date is January 1st of 2022.
Yeah, so there's going to be a flood of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of them have already done it. I don't think the majority of them have done it yet. But like I said, if someone's in the maximally funded whole life or IUL space, that's what it affects. All right, so since AG4, we talked about AG49, there's really nothing to talk, like we're not going to talk about it because it's just something that affects the top end rate of IULs, but there's really nothing to go into too much with it because it just happened across the board. The
Right.
only
It's
thing I'll say,
yeah, it's a level playing field.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's AG 49 and there's AG 49A. So there's two rulings that basically happened because like Pacific Life was one of the bigger ones. that got a lawsuit because of how they were illustrating policies. So it has affected certain areas in certain places, but it's trying to make a more level playing field in the IUL space, basically, because there's multipliers and bonuses and things like that that people are using, and how they calculate that and how they buy the options. But like I said, if you want to take a deeper dive into it, you can. There's a lot of great stuff on it because it's now been, over a year for AG 49A, AG 49. The original one I think is 2 years now. No, I'm sorry, AG 49 was like 5 years. Apologize. That happened like 5-6 years ago. All I will say to this is that when 7-8 years ago, when I was at World Financial Group, one of our Voya reps used to illustrate and tell us that we could illustrate all of our policies still in the, this is 2024, basically 2014, excuse me, that we were illustrating, he was teaching people to illustrate policies at 10%, running it all the way through. So AG 49 directly put the kibosh on all of that, so that illustration rates are a little bit more realistic to what is actually going to happen within the policy, even though you can never truly illustrate all that. But that's AG 49. So then the Secure Act, that's actually a pretty big one, especially for those that are doing planning, doing actual planning. And especially when even the most direct relation to it is, especially in the RMD world of what you mentioned, Jody, and how inheritance IRAs work as well. So Jody, you mentioned, affecting RMDs. Do you know what the Secure Act and how it affected RMDs?
Changed the requirement age from 78.5 to 72.
That is correct. So talk about that real quick. What does that affect? Like, what does that mean for someone that's actually doing planning?
Well, definitely affects the age of that you start taking the RMD for new people.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I remember correctly, I thought if you're already taking the RMD, if you turned 7.5 before the ruling, you still had to take it. But if you hadn't hit 72 yet, you wouldn't begin it until 72. So,
yeah, I'll have to look up like some of the specifics within that, but
I know they got to take a break. I think it was last year because of COVID.
yeah.
There's just a lot of different rules that we're trying to explain to clients.
So like I said, that's an important one for people that are dealing with that age bracket of some people may not be aware of that rule and how that works. Or they may come across a client that is in that age bracket and they're asking you for advice or a recommendation, and that would be something within that to be able to mention, knowing that the RMDs were pushed back. If you're dealing with a client that's 69 or 68 or 65 and preparing that within the planning model, that's something that's really important to understand.
Well, it affected, if you want to tie it into like annuities, it affected how you would start the income stream for them.
Also true. So all of that affects, that's a direct effect to how policies are sold to clients. So understanding that at least to a certain extent, and I would look into and, again, read some articles. I don't have articles like that I have ready right now, but the Secure Act was something that affected, like I said, RMDs is a big one. I mentioned the other one, but what did it affect with inherited IRAs?
I don't think, to me, it wasn't a huge change, but I think there was a effect with the way you elected the payout or the way you did the actual rollover when somebody was deceased.
Yeah, so the long and short of it, and this was something that directly affected a couple agents actually that were trying to write policies. But so I'll give a real example of how that worked. But long story short is that an inherited IRA, now with the Secure Act, the government basically wants its money quicker. So when you get an inherited IRA, you're now required to take that money and pay the taxes on it within 10 years from when you receive the inherited IRA. So previously that wasn't the case. You can push it back to,
Stretch it
RMDs
for a long
or
time.
when the deceased person turned 72 or 70 and a half rather, before the ruling. But that's something so I'll tell you one example of how it directly affected a few of the agents is, if you have a policy, an annuity that you sold before 2019, it didn't have the Secure Act guidelines on it. But afterwards it does. So all annuities right now, there are almost, I can probably say without a shadow of a doubt, but I'm going to give a 1% margin of error. There are almost no carriers that will take money from an inherited IRA into an income annuity at this point. Can anyone tell me the reason why, based on what you just heard about the 10-year rule?
It's going to go longer than 10 years.
Exactly. So because of how the payments happen and break down, if you have a lifetime income that's going to happen from that, that means that you cannot take out all of that money within the 10-year period, which means that no carrier will take that because the math and the taxes of how that's worked is going to be really hinky on the back end. So if it's an inherited IRA, you now cannot put that inherited IRA into an income annuity for that client. So that has disallowed those sales to be able to happen. Now they will allow it to go into an accumulation annuity, and making sure that throughout that 10-year period of time they still take the amount that they need to pay the taxes on. But again, income annuities, inherited IRAs, moving money into an income annuity, they put the kibosh on that because of how it works.
Is that true for a spouse too? 'Cause I thought a spouse could still put it into their own name or into their own
I was
IRA.
gonna say it does not affect
Yeah.
spousal. Jason
Yeah,
was giving it.
It's
all
not
not-
considered, it's not considered inherited because it gets transferred directly to the spouse.
Just non-spousal.
Yeah, non-spousal inheritance.
Exactly. So literally, this is exactly happening with an agent right now selling to one of their clients where it was a married couple, and for whatever reason, when the one of the spouses passed away, there was some kind of error that happened where they made it an inherited IRA rather than a spousal IRA. And now the husband wants to take that money and put it into an income annuity, and the company that's receiving the money is saying, no, we can't do that because this is counted as a inherited IRA. So now they have to go back and they sent a marriage license in, all this crazy stuff to change it back to a spousal IRA, so they can change the guidelines so they can put it into an income annuity so that they can turn it on for income.
Two areas to expand on that. One, if it goes to a charity, and the other, I just lost my train of thought. One is the charity. One that I just thought of was a charity. What happens if you're using the money that's going to be paid out to a charity? Do they have to take it within 10 years? Do you know, Nathan?
I mean, if
They do.
Yeah, it's considered the same.
In his head, yes.
Consider that as non-spousal.
It's
so-
still
it is,
non-spousal.
If it's not spousal, it's inherited. It's just, it's kind of that simple. And it would be in the best interest. I mean, the non-for-profit has no, or the charity, which mostly are not for profit, there's really no benefit or disadvantage of taking it over a 10-year period of time or whatnot. They can take the money. It's tax-free anyway. They're not paying taxes. Do whatever they want. They can reinvest it. And that's kind of what, you would want. But yeah, it doesn't affect. They don't get that any special treatment.
There you go. Yes. So good question that comes from that though. But that's what I mean. Like,
Jeff, ask me those questions. Don't ask Nathan.
True for the most part, but I may surprise you sometimes. But again, so that's something that's important to understand and know, because like literally, like I said, you have someone that asking for annuity recommendation, they're asking for income, asking not only is this qualified money or non-qualified money, but what type of, if it's qualified money, what type of IRA is it? Well, if it's an inherited IRA, that limits the options that you are going to recommend to your client, as in your client as the agent. Because you do not want to do a, well, hey, I'm going to recommend an income annuity, and then come back and they do all the paperwork and then find out, oh, we can't do this, because that puts egg on your face. Again, that's something that directly expects us as marketers to understanding a little bit about how that rule works within that context. And so any other questions on the security? And then, well, the last thing that we'll talk about, and this will be more of a discussion because it's happening in some states already, but the old DOL ruling, and I know you got a webinar upcoming on some of that, but regulations are a changing. But anything else in the Secure Act before we move on? All right. So last one then is what Jason brought up with suitability and fiduciary regulations. So I slapped on there the DOL ruling that was going through in like 2015. It never ended up happening, but that is probably one of the that's something that will affect all annuity and IUL and life insurance sales for a lot of agents. So it's already, I believe, California and New York, of course.
Yep.
And there's probably a couple other states, I believe, but I know California and New York have that ruling already where you have to, it's the best interest of client ruling. So you have to be able to prove that you have a process and that you made a recommendation that is not just suitable, which is what broker dealers and insurance agents are required to do, is they're only required to do what's suitable for a client. They're not required to do what's in the best interest of the client. So that's the biggest difference between, so I think I might have showed you guys did I show you guys the butcher versus the vegetarian, the dietitian?
I don't recall it, no.
Here. This will actually be a good, now I'm going to premise this by saying, because I know all of you are in the broker dealer world, that this is not.
No, Jeff's not.
Well, yeah, I'm not anymore. He used to be though.
I don't get 59.
What was that?
I don't get called out on 59.
No, I do. That's why I decided I've never wanted to get my license, because I do
social media.
Yeah, social media, all that stuff. I am not going through all of that. That I would be just as non-compliant as you, Jason.
Oh.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. So this is it's a 2-minute clip basically. So dietitian versus the butcher.
You guys don't know Chicago, but I'm sure in your neighborhood you
here?
guys have an old school butcher where you walk in and there's a bunch of guys.
Can everyone hear it?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Guys, no gloves, big white aprons, and there's Frank, and there's Stevie, and there's Mikey, and these guys know more about meat and more about animals and more about cooking the meat than any of us will ever learn. And so you walk in, you say, "Hey, Lou, I need to, I'm barbecuing this weekend, right? What do you like?" And Lou goes to, the big racks of stuff he has underneath the glass, and he goes, the veal chops, just in from Argentina, they are the bomb. And you go, "Veal? Oh, I like veal. What do you got on skirt steak?" "Oh, we got some great skirt steak. Just came in yesterday from Montana. Skirt steak is one of my favorite. Marinated up a little bit. It's fantastic." Lou will never say to you, "Elliot, it's a little long on the meat here, big guy. Your cholesterol is getting high. Why don't you go down to the fishmonger a couple blocks and have a nice piece of salmon?" Right? He'll never do that. Why? His job is to sell me meat, and I go in, actually the same way I go into the Toyota dealership, because I like Toyotas, and I trust the salesman to sell me a good product if I trust him. And the fact that he's got my interest at heart vis-a-vis my expectations for selling me that thing. By the same token, when I go to see a dietitian, I know she's going to look at all of my labs, she's going to take all the measurements, she's going to run all of her analysis, and she's going to absolutely give me her best thinking on what's best for me. Whether she's a vegetarian or a meat lover, likes this, likes that, if she thinks I should be doing something differently, even if it's not good for her, she's going to give me an opinion that's for my interest. So what's the difference between a fiduciary and the brokers? Well, these are dietitians, these are butchers. It's that simple. Brokers are butchers selling product. Fiduciaries are dietitians looking after your health. The problem is most people think that their butcher is a dietitian. So when one of your moms or dads or friends calls the broker and says, I got 200 grand, I sold a little piece of property, or I got some inheritance, what should I do with it? They're going in thinking they're talking to a dietitian, and they're really talking to Lou the butcher. So
before I say anything, thoughts?
Pretty accurate.
Great artist.
I'm friends with a lot of butchers.
That is like I said, there's a lot we can unpack with that concept and idea, but that is something that's happening a lot with the broker dealer world. That's why like LPL and all these places, Edward Jones and Merrill Lynch have been under fire a lot because of that concept of the difference between suitability and being a fiduciary. And one of the things that I'll comment, regardless of whether you're in, either of those worlds, the suitability world or the broker dealer worlds, suitability or fiduciary worlds, really, I would start off to say that that's doing what's in the best interest of the client is a mindset first. It's an attitude, it's a character thing. Because it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on, whether you're a broker dealer or an insurance agent or an actual fiduciary, there is a lot of gray area within that of what it means to do what's in the best interest of the client. On that note, though, that's what's important with the ruling that's happening in certain states right now is that everyone is having to prove that they're doing what's in the best interest of the client. And that's what the BOIC, a lot of people just call it the BIC, best interest of client. But that's why we're seeing a lot of those rules and guidelines change. So this is going to affect, everybody that's in the broker dealer world. It's also going to affect, like I said, if the DOL ruling came in like it was going to, the world was going to get very crazy really quickly because most annuities were sold by insurance agents as a whole that don't have their series license. The IMO was not a financial institution. The carrier was, but some carriers were determining that, we're not going to sign off on the best interest of the client because that puts a lot of liability on their lap. So anyways, the idea being is that having softwares and technologies that we have access to, things like Annuities Genius or Agency Rocket, where you have something that has a sales process, that you can search a database, that you can prove that I have a process and this is why I sold this client this product, and this is the reason why it's in the best interest of that client. That is becoming more and more important in the world that we're living in, especially when it's coming from qualified money. That's usually if it's not coming from qualified money, then it's not as put in as much scrutiny. But when you're dealing with qualified money and you're putting it into an annuity, or you're putting it into, a broker, a variable product, a variable annuity, or a VUL, or things like that, those are being watched more and more. And like, if you're in California, New York right now, like, you have to prove that in some context that you had a process and that you did what's in the best interest.
So Nathan, what do you think's coming down the road then? And so illustrations that have moving parts,
Yeah.
they now have a signature page for both the producer and the insured.
Yeah.
i.e. Universal life plans.
Yeah.
Are we going to have to, you think, number one, do you think they're going to give us an outline of what we need, a checklist, if you will, to satisfy their requirement? Or do you think we're just going to have a narrative which we should have the client, the prospective annuity holder, funds holder, sign at the time that the transaction is completed?
So I know at the time they were playing around with an actual form.
Yep.
So it's going to be a little bit of both, but more so it's going to rely upon the form. And one of the things that was, that they were talking about, for example, was revealing commissions, and actually requiring that you have that discussion in that form, even for an insurance agent that doesn't get, it doesn't come out of the client's pocket for that. So there's a lot of explanation things that were going on. And like I said, look at England or Australia right now, and how they sell insurance products. In England over the past, I don't know when it happened, but you guys can correct me if I'm wrong if you end up doing some research, but I believe England is 100% fee based on how they approach sales, whether you're selling life insurance or annuities or financial products or mutual funds, whatever it is, you are fee based within that model. So there's no commission based anymore. So that's something that some regulators and some people are looking down the pipeline over the next, it's probably not going to happen anytime soon, to be honest, because there's a lot of pushback on that. But I mean, within the next 10 years or so, that's a possibility of something that could come down the pipeline, which would radically change how every product is sold, and what we're doing. So the people that have especially with where the industry is going, and this is why a lot of people are talking about getting their Series 65, and their 66, because you're able to do that on that side. That's where I would say, and I'm not an expert at all, but based on what I've seen from a lot of people that are talking about it, that know what they're talking about, if anybody asks what series license should I get, almost everyone's saying 65.
Yeah. So the industry, I think, is going to definitely go fee-based planning. They've been talking about that for years now. It takes a lot of, I mean, it's tough too. I mean, when you sit down with a client and you say, hey, I'm going to get 6% off of this annuity, and they're dropping, let's say, $500,000, and they realize that you're going to make 30 grand. There's a bit of animosity there immediately, and they feel like they're getting screwed. But yeah, I mean, when I was at Thrivent, in 17, we had a checklist, just like what you were talking about. They tried to stay ahead of the tsunami and, we disclosed all fees and everything up front. And once they dropped that in like 2018, we stopped having to do that, which made it easier. But yeah, I mean, 65 fee-based, that I think that's where it's going to go, just because commissions and everything else, it eliminates the entire question on the table if you're being a true fiduciary or not, because if you're just getting a level fee, it doesn't matter what product you put them in. You know, so plus it takes away the double dip, which is another thing that I think a lot of the industry wants to get rid of also. People that are fee-based planning right now are also making the commission or the RIP on the other side with the life insurance, the annuities and whatnot. And it really, it's a lot of money for a little bit of work. So yeah.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, the fee is being paid by the person having the plan developed. The client's going to pay that fee.
Yes.
In your
Well,
scenario,
most of
most of the time. On our side, on the fixed side, if you will, what in overseas, are the insurance companies paying the fees to the producers that are representing those insurance companies? Are they being collected by
the train of thought that and the things that I've heard, individuals are paid a salary and then they get a discretionary bonus based on performance at the end of the year. And that's one way to get around the restrictions or what they're thinking about. So it's gonna, you know, everybody's gonna make a small salary or a large salary, and then, you know, bonuses will be based out on production. And I mean, that's merit production bonuses. That doesn't go against any of the laws or the rulings. So yeah.
Yeah, and I would say there's two different types of fee structures within there. Is that you have the fee structure where, you know, clients are paying a fee directly to the agent for advice, and it doesn't matter what the advice is for. And then you have the other fee structure where you have, like, you know, wrapped fees, basically, where Series 65 says I sell a product, doesn't matter whether it's an annuity, a life insurance product, or a money management portfolio, I'm getting 1% of that, or rather, you know, it's usually 1.5 or higher, you know, 2%, and then the agent's getting a piece of that, basically. But all that goes into, that's assets under management. So those are kind of the two fee base that I've seen. But like I said, if the world goes that way, the 1.5 million licensed life insurance agents that are out there, that means that the industry is going to get a lot smaller.
Consolidate dramatically.
Exactly. For you to stay ahead of the curve, that means you have to get your series license. So like I said, I'm saying 10 years, maybe it's longer, maybe, I mean, it's probably going to, I would imagine that we're going to move in that direction at some point. I don't know the timeline, but I don't see enough traction on the other side to fight something like that forever.
It's too costly.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jason.
No, it's too costly to fight this battle. You know, I mean, it's just like everything else with our government. It like Nathan says, it takes a lot of time, and there's not enough people on board. I mean, you're taking away, you know, the true definition, in my opinion, of capitalism and entrepreneurship by taking away the commissions. So, you know, our focus at Wella is, we're looking for people that have an entrepreneurial mindset. Well, if this goes into effect, you're not really looking. I mean, you are, but you're not. It's you know, you don't get rewarded really.
I think you're just shifting it. Because if you're looking at a base salary, if you will, there is a company. As a matter of fact, I just had a conversation with somebody that I'm recruiting, that their compensation structure is similar to that. He gets a base salary, and based on merit or production is how he gets compensated for his performance.
And usually that's like, I mean, most of the individuals that are doing well, I mean, are doing, you know, their numbers, it comes out to, you know, roughly like 30% salary, 70%, you know, commission bonus or merit bonus, production bonus, whatever you want to call it. And in that sense, I mean, you're so close to that 100%. I mean, what's the point then? So it would, you know, they're going to have to level it off and increase salaries to get that probably closer to the 70-30 on the opposite side, where, you know, your salary is probably 70% and you're getting quarterly or annual bonuses. And I mean, there's ways to go around that, but creativity will fix a lot of this too, to make individuals happy and continue to make the earnings that they are. But from my research that I did back in 2017, if this does go into effect, a lot of people, a lot of agents out there and BDs and their income is going to drop dramatically. It's going to be probably almost a 30 to 40% shaving. That's what I read and what was anticipated. Now, obviously that didn't go into effect, so there's no way to prove that. But it's going to, like Nathan said, there's going to be a huge exodus of people in the insurance business if this happens. And getting your 65 is not a bad idea.
Yeah. Well,
sorry.
No. That it's good. Like I said, it's a very it's apropos for us to have that conversation and be aware of it, because agents like to talk. And if people are asking, especially understanding that of an agent's development, at some point, I do believe that if you're in the industry and you're going to be in here, this is going to be your career, you're going to be here for a long time, you should get your Series 65 license. I do believe that, but it's not something that you should be doing right away. I think, especially with where we're at right now, it's not a requirement, but being able to talk intelligently about, well, like even a video like that, like I've shared that video a bunch of times because super simple, wasn't me who said it. And talking about the difference between fiduciary and suitability. And that's an important concept of what we're doing for clients and what agents need to understand. And if you can talk to them and say, hey, they're asking, hey, do you guys have an outlet for, getting a series license? Well, that's a real conversation of, like, there's a lot of people that will come up to me and say, well, hey, I'm thinking about getting my series license, going down the 6 and 63 route, and then having a real conversation about, well, why did you want to go that direction? Like, what's pushing you toward that? Because based on what I understand and believe, like, I would push them towards getting a 65 license. I think that's going to be better suited for the direction that the industry is going. It's going to cause less heartache, and it also allows them to, I think, be better within the world of, because we actually understand a little bit of both sides of the field, of being a better advisor to their clients. Because a lot of times, well, and this could be either one, but I'm not going to, I'm going to stop. That's my soapbox.
Well, Nathan, you can't call yourself an advisor unless you have your 65.
That's true.
So if you want to go into the advising arena, you have to get your 65 or your 66. There's no really other way to do it.
Yeah, that's true.
Along those thinking of lines, I wonder if state departments of insurance will eventually be eliminated and everything will be on a federal level.
All right, big brother.
I was going to say that I don't see happening. Like that is a whole revolution of thought.
Yeah, and that's the only time I will say this. Thank goodness for California and New York, because they will never join that.
Texas too.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's a good large handful of, Illinois wouldn't do that. Illinois likes its rules and regulations that are different, so that than everyone else. So
that's why we're in the financial state that we are.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Jody.
Yeah.
To bore you with Illinois politics here, but we're in a pretty interesting state, and I'll just leave it at that.
It is true.
Come on over to Michigan.
Yeah.
Here too.
I thought about it.
On my end, we're going to end up there in the next 3 to 5 years. I know we are. So my wife's family, all my wife's family is out there. Well, not all of it, but most of it. So yeah. So, but anyways, I think that's good as a discussion. Just as a quick recap. So we talked about 7702. Well, we talked about regulations in general, and us keeping an ear to the ground is important for our development as business development advisors, and to be able to share that information to the advisors that we're working with. We can leverage those conversations. If we know about them, we're seen as the expert. There's probably not a lot of other marketers. The good marketers and BDAs are doing it, but that's something that you can leverage within your conversations with agents, that if they're not doing it, then that's another way you can win them over to earning their contracts, basically. The regulations that we specifically talked about was 7702, the AG 49 and AG 49A, the Secure Act, and then we spent the rest of the time talking about the potential DOL ruling, suitability, difference between suitability and fiduciary, and the BIC, best interest of client concept. So all of those are applicable. There's other ones out there that is that is, again, are good to know about. And again, just keep your ear to the ground of things that are happening and what's going on in the industry, and leverage that information to be able to share with other people. So with that said, I mean, good discussion. I appreciated, everyone and your guys' input and feedback. Leverage that throughout the rest of the week. The only other thing that, just as a wrap up, so next Tuesday, we do have the debt to action plan webinar. So we've had quite a few more people register for it, but I think everyone here is pretty much registered for it. But if you haven't, register yourself and find, like I said, a handful of other people that a webinar is very easy to introduce people to. So we'll do a good job on the webinar and have that conversation. Jeff, it looks like you had a question.
No, just quickly, remind me how long would the length of time it's scheduled for? An
It's
hour?
11 a.m. Central Standard Time. It'll go from 11 to 12.
An hour, okay.
And that is, the registration is in the band.
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah. So you go to upcoming events. If you're on the computer, just hit events. The next one, debt to action plan, right there.
I
And then-
registered before you changed the date. Do I need to re-register?
No, we changed
This
the,
one.
the link is exactly the same.
So is the pen on the, above it, the invite from Zoom.
Oh, yeah. So I copied and pasted this previously. I didn't change this post on here. So, but whenever everyone else that's seen it, I did post something as well on Band, and I know you guys are probably restricted because of Big Brother watching. But if you are on LinkedIn, I did create an event on LinkedIn, and super easy just to click and invite other agents that are on there. If you go to the event, you click that you're going to attend, and then you can share that and invite other people to attend as well.
How are we, how do we know who is inviting who? So like, let's say I, threw out for Jeff and Jody, independents in, the Detroit area. And then Jeff, I, did the northern suburbs, and I took the southern suburbs, or whatever the case may be. If I threw a connected invitation out there and all of a sudden we have like 40 people that registered, how would they know which BDA invited them or whatnot?
We do have on there that who invited you.
Who invited you? Okay.
And so a lot of people do. We didn't make it a requirement, but most people do actually fill that out. What I'm going to do is I will share the list actually with everyone.
Okay.
I'll throw it on Band of who's registered for right now. And then what ends up happening afterwards is I always send a list before we do the event, like an hour before, so that you guys can know, okay, well, who's registered, who's not registered. And then I send the attendee list afterwards to you as well. So you
Okay.
can see who actually showed up and who didn't, so that you can follow up with them and say, hey, I saw you registered for the event, but you weren't able to attend. We did record it. I'll send that recording out. Or, hey, you attended. What were your thoughts? Really awesome software. Let's have a conversation about earning your contracts.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah. So, but first thing is getting people there, basically. So I'll share that list in Band a little bit later. But awesome. Anything else before we wrap up and get out of here?
No, this was good.
Well, I
This was good
appreciate the
today.
discussion, everyone. Leverage and use that to your heart's content.
All right. And I'm not going after any IMOs yet. Just
I was
for the
going to
record.
say, as a side note conversation, put them on Band. we will, let's have the discussion, but I'll get involved in that.
Okay.
As well, because those are phenomenal. Bring on, we'll pull out the red carpet for those places. But I would say definitely not a focus, because they are long, like that could take another 6 months to a year.
Okay.
But I do want to, like, Dennis and I are gonna have a conversation when he gets back, and what we want to do is start having the conversation with those larger relationships. How do we all work together to make a cohesive message to that IMO about our value proposition? And
Nathan,
starting them along that process, basically.
okay.
Because like I said, we don't want to just put it on the back burner and say, okay, we're not going to talk to them for 6 months. It's let's make a plan, and then we can start the conversation. But definitely don't keep, it's not a focus.
Yeah.
We want to keep the follow-up going.
Well, if you do the leaders partners group out in North Barrington, I would have Jeff. Jeff knows those guys pretty well. He's worked with them.
Started with him.
Yeah.
Oh,
So that would be a real good one for Jeff.
yeah, and like, let's all discuss that. I mean, like I said, we'll discuss that and make a plan, because again, those are worthwhile conversations for all of us to participate in. And, the more we get them on board, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
But, yeah, definitely, it's just not a focus, but don't shy away from getting the information and having at least a brief conversation, so you can put a note, say, this is what we talked about. And then those are things that myself, Dennis, and other people will jump on to help out with.
Yeah. Jody, Jeff, and Nathan, are you guys going on this? Are you guys going to do that webinar next week for the DOA?
I looked at it. I don't know yet. I might register and tag along with it,
Okay.
but I may not be like 100% active.
Which weapon are we talking about? The debt to action?
No, the fiduciary and the Biden administration, how they're looking at the DOL and how that all's gonna play out.
Is that the email you sent?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's from Insurance News Network magazine was the,
They're the one hosting.
yeah.
I'm going to register for it right now, so I have the information.
What day is it?
Oh, God, that's actually, hold on.
Is that at the same time?
Oh no, it's the next day. It's the next day.
It's the 11th.
Yeah, I'm gonna be in the African American conference on the 10th and 11th the whole day. So yeah, I got my goodie bag. So
Ooh. Well, I did register for it, but yeah, let's push people to the debt to action one, and then yeah, I'll be on that. I'll probably be on that one to listen in.
okay, yeah, I'm gonna see if they're gonna record it, because if they are recording that, I may just watch it afterwards and do the other stuff. So
Yeah.
Cool.
That makes sense. Well, I appreciate you sharing that stuff like that. That's good stuff. Like I would, in the future, post that on Band.
Okay.
Because like I said, that's something like those kind of events, even the question about the IMO and stuff like that, unless it's directly personal to you guys, try to use Band as much as possible to post that type of information, because that's where we get more eyes on it, and some feedback that, there may be something that someone picks up on or grabs that everyone can use. That's what I want Band to really be. It's like that exact hub of you sharing that resource or asking those questions. Throw them in Band.
Yep.
Perfect. All right, ladies, gentlemen, or really just ladies.
Lady. Oh, that was low, and that was recorded. Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you for the benefit of the doubt.
This is if
Wow.
those that are listening to recording on our YouTube channel, this is why you need to become a BDA. We have lots of fun. All right, everyone. You guys have a great rest of your day. Let me know if you need anything else. I'm sure we'll touch base, but I'll send that message out for who's registered on Tuesday, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good, buddy.
All right.
Thanks, Nick.
Catch you later.